All right, coming in at number 19 on our Locked On Senators NHL draft rankings, it's Igor Chernishov from Dynamo Moscow.
Yep, Chernyshov. This is a guy that has some good pro experience, Ross. You mentioned he's with Dynamo Moscow, and he played a good mix in the KHL and MHL. Actually, majority of his time was spent in the KHL, which you love to see in players draft year. In 34 KHL games, only 3 goals, 1 assist, 4 points, so kind of underwhelming there. But it's important to always contrast that with his MHL stats, when more similar to his peers rather than the KHL, because in the MHL he dominated just like people thought he would. In 22 MHL games, 13 goals, 15 assists, good for 28 points, so more than a point per game guy, plus 15. So this is a kid that obviously it seems like he doesn't need to prove anything more in the MHL. That's why he was able to spend a lot of his time up in the pros in the KHL.
I'm a big fan of this player. 6'2", 192 pounds. One of the older players in the draft, born in November 2005. Bob McKenzie's got him 18 on his list, so right where we have him basically. And Elite Prospects has him at 19. That's where you can find him on Chris Peters' list. He's 18 with Corey Pronman, 22 for Craig Button, 23 for Scott Wheeler, and 30 for McKean. So one thing's for sure, he's a first-round pick. And the play against his own peers is what tells the tale, right? He hasn't been able to stand up on the international scale and do that because of obviously the situation with Russia. But Chernishov should be dominating his age group, and he plays on such a team that dominates. This isn't a very even playing field in this league, and we know that Moscow is one of the teams that has money, and they're going to invest in their farm system as well, their MHL system, and that's where you get Chernishov. So I wish that he was playing in a more projectable league, somewhere that you could really kind of put the numbers and say, okay, over a point per game. If it was the OHL or somewhere USHL even, it'd be a little bit easier to project. But I just worry because I'm watching some of these highlights, and it's like the game is easy for him out there. So I'd like to see if we turn up the difficulty, what it could be. But if he could develop into a power forward type, I think that a team would be very happy to have him because, again, it is the MHL. It's a junior league in Russia. But in the 13 games that Elite Prospects tracked, he was like in the 99th percentile of defense, 97th percentile in offense. Like he made a mockery of the league. And Bills, you can only play in the league that you're put in. So that's where I'll stay with Chernishov. That I am high on his upside. I just wish we could have been able to see it at a higher competition.
I mean, he played 34 games in the KHL, Ross.
Right.
So we,
I'd like the in between. I'd
yeah.
like the in between. That's where I'm at.
So we did get a good sample size of him playing up there. Now, I know you're looking at those 34 games, Ross, and you're saying 4 points. You don't know how you feel about that, but I got a spin zone for you here.
Oh,
I actually think that this was good for him because when you're dominating in the MHL, like you just went over, he clearly was. You start getting used to getting those points. You're playing an offensive game. You're able to dipsy doodle through other teams' defense. Everything looks easy for you. Okay, let's find out how the rest of your game is. So in the KHL, he had to really focus on his off puck abilities. And that's what EP really hammers home about him is that he's so well-rounded now because he's not just one of those prospects that gets comfortable with the puck and comfortable dominating. He was really challenged in the KHL. So he said, okay, if I'm not able to score off the rush like I used to be, how else am I going to impact the game here? How else am I going to have the coach trust me to get ice time? Well, you got to be good defensively. You got to use that size that he has, that 6'2", 192-pound frame that he has to play off the puck. He finishes his checks. He's got a high motor. And Dylan Griffin from EP wrote a good article on him. I would ask everyone to go check that out. He does a lot of film clips, really nice breakdown. And he mentions that Chernishov gets a lot of scoring chances off the rush, but doesn't necessarily capitalize on them. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have a good shot. Like in the KHL, there's lots of good goalies. So he's still getting really good chances, even up in the pro leagues here. So I really think that you look at good size, good speed, good shot, good motor. All of these are very projectable skills when it comes to translating to the NHL. And I think next year, Ross, he's probably going to play full time in the KHL, and he's probably going to have a little bit more of a carved out role, especially now that the team and coach is more familiar with him at that level. So I think next year we could see the points. Certainly, I'm going to assume he's going to get more than 4 points in a full KHL season.
Industry chatter is one of my favorite parts of the Elite Prospects Draft Guide, and scouts have very mixed opinions about him. In May, an NHL scout told EP that he just doesn't see it with Chernyshov. Not fast enough, doesn't play heavy enough to be a power forward, but is he a checker? Is he a tweener? Says that they'll stay away. So he's on at least one team's do not draft because of that, just not being able to project what he could be at the next level in North America. I think that he does have a physical game from the clips that we saw, and I'm hopeful that that can translate, because I think he'd be a fun player with some serious skills that could come over as soon as, you know, the KHL contract ends and be a contributing top 9 member. I just think in this range, there's other guys who I think have more certainty in a top 6 upside, whereas I think you might have less with Chernishov. So he's going to be a little bit lower on my list compared to the guys who he's around, where we have him at 19 on our rankings.
Yeah, that's fair, Ross. I think he's just such a high floor player. Like, I think it's pretty certain he will have the ability to play in the NHL, especially after probably 2 or 3 KHL seasons under his belt when he comes to North America. I've got him at 4 stars here. I like this player. I think he's got a lot of projectable skills, like I mentioned. So I think this would be a safe pick for the Ottawa Senators. However, you're dealing with the Russian factor here. You don't know how long he's going to spend over there. You don't know if he's going to want to come over here when the team wants him to come over here. All those things that go on, unfortunately, with that situation. And I also don't think he's going to be there at 25. I think there are going to be a handful of teams that like him and pick him much earlier. So that's the reason I've got him at 4 stars here, but I do like Chernishov as a player. And if the Sens were to get him at 25, I wouldn't be upset.
No spoilers, but he's 26 on my list right now. So in the range, but even at 25, I'll guarantee I have at least one guy on my list who I would take ahead of Chernishov. But a fun prospect development for Chernishov ahead. I'm curious to see if he's able to produce in the AHL or in the NHL eventually, but in the KHL as recent as this upcoming season. I can tell you one thing for certain. He's 19th with an average of 21 on our Locked On Senators NHL draft rankings.